All right. Well, here we are, Tim Parkin, Matt Payne. We're two of the co-founders for the Natural Landscape Photography Awards. And one of the things that we absolutely want to be able to do to provide extra value for competition participants and entrants is to offer some critiques of some of the photographs that have been submitted to the awards each year. It takes a lot of time out of our schedule to not only find a time for us to do this because we are on two opposite ends of the world, but also, just the effort it takes to ask people who wants to do it, put those people in names in a spreadsheet, figure out which photos line up to which person, put them in a Lightroom catalog, and then actually produce it. So it sounds easier than it is.
Yeah, I think it's really useful for people, though. I think in general, even if it's your pictures being seeing what people think of in terms of competitions is often different than a critique you might get in a workshop. And you've done critiques in workshops before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every single workshop that we do for Munch, we're doing critiques as a big part of it. And so being able to react and respond very quickly to a photograph, what works about a photograph, what doesn't work, what could be improved, why maybe that photograph didn't do as well as someone thought it should do in a competition. Those are all things that we're going to talk about as we review images. So what we've done is we've gathered a list of people. We've thrown all of their images that they submitted this year into a Lightroom catalog. We'll kind of pick and choose a few images from each person to go through and just see how far we can get in an hour.
Yeah, and we'll do another one hopefully.
Yeah,
Soon as see
yeah, absolutely.
the more we can do, the better. So we'll see how it goes again. I'm
Right.
keen. Get them
All
up.
right. All right. Well, let's get this party started.
I
All
can see
right.
them.
Perfect. All right. So first person we have on the list here is Alexandra De Pomeroy. And it looks like he submitted quite a lot of images. I'm guessing some of these were part of a project submission. We'll just kind of go through a few at a time just to get a feel for, you know, what worked about the image, what didn't work about the image. And I know you've got the certificates pulled up.
I have. I've got the ones that did the best out of the collection here in front of me, so I can tell you which ones those are once we've had a quick look. So
Good
I
deal.
think I think we can start on one of the ones that did better, which I think is number 7.
Number
Uh,
7. Okay. This one.
that's right. Yeah, that
All
one
right.
got through second round prejudging.
Nice.
Um, it's a reasonably strong image there with a cracking view of some mountains as well there.
Right. And my approach to evaluating images, it might be fun to talk a little bit about that. Like,
Yeah,
because when we're prejudging, we have a catalog of, gosh, anywhere from 10 to 20,000 images that we're trying to get through. And so we're kind of quickly just evaluating stuff. And I don't know about you, Tim, but the way that my brain works is I'm looking for flaws, right? I'm looking for things that don't work about an image. And then after I do that, I refilter all of the submissions based on the scores that I gave that are higher. And then I go
yeah,
through them all again to kind of, okay, now that I've gotten rid of the ones that have really glaring flaws, now I can really kind of slowly weed through and find the ones that kind of rise to the top.
yeah. Because I think our first round is typically getting rid of the ones that don't have a chance of winning at all, and often that's reasonably clear. And this sounds like it should be really easy, but having seen how the judges judge things, it's very hard to make that decision of whether a judge will like something or not. So it has to meet a certain standard, really, a basic standard to get in front of a judge. But it doesn't have to be exceptional.
Right.
Each judge looks at things differently. But yeah, that first round, look at things that maybe don't work as well. And then the later rounds, you get to the second round and prejudging, you're starting to look at what makes it a good photograph.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's talk about this image here from Alexander. What I've, it has some nice immediate visual impact. It's a fairly, I would say for what it is, it's a fairly quiet, grand landscape. It's got
Yeah.
some nice colors in the clouds, but it's not like in your face. It's a nice image. You can actually see a road there in the background to kind of give it some context for place. I don't recognize this particular location.
Probably Scandinavia, I think, by the shape of the mountains there.
Okay. Well, there you go. Someplace I haven't spent any time.
If
Um,
that was in Scotland, I'd have been up that middle one before now.
gotcha. Well, and so, one thing I like to do too is I'm looking for images that kind of surprise me, right? So in an image like this, it surprises me because I don't recognize the place for starters, right? So it has a good thing going for it in that regard. So I recommend people submit images that maybe aren't of a super recognizable place, unless it's just one of the most amazing images you've ever seen in your life from that particular scene. And the reason why I say that is because if it's a very familiar scene, it's very likely that for lack of a better way of saying it, you're kind of standing on the shoulder of people who've already shot that scene before. And so it's very difficult for you as the photographer to bring something to the table that is kind of got your own spin or your own take on it. So if you're able to do that, that's great. But
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the things that maybe make this image maybe not stand out. So immediately, I'm always looking for composition, and I'm always looking at what I like to call visual weight. So what I mean by visual weight, if you can see this big mountain here on the right occupies probably almost a third of the photograph, right? So it has a large amount of visual weight, and it's dark, right? It's this dark
Yeah.
foreboding rock face, and it in some ways kind of takes away from the rest of the image that isn't dark. So I'm always looking at those relationships between large objects, dark objects, bright objects. There's nothing in this photograph that, pulls my eye off the frame or makes me look elsewhere, but I do
Yeah.
think that that big mountain, commands a lot of attention without having maybe the part of the image that you want the viewer to look at.
Yeah, that's one of the things. When I first looked at this, I looked at my initial reaction was actually the seaweed at the bottom left-hand corner, and wondered it's a little bit of a distraction in terms of the nice reflections we've got. And I can understand why it's there to a certain extent, because that's balancing up, hopefully balancing away that large, massive mountain to the other side. But it's doing it in a way that doesn't really add much to the picture. I don't think the seaweed there is actually adding much to the little bit of shoreline. And there's a lot of sky in that picture for what is the interest as well. I would say my interest in that picture is the very cool shaped mountain in the middle and that atmospheric clouds to the left hand side of that mountain, and then the reflection of it. So I've got this interest to begin with. Sadly, my interest isn't in that big mountain on the right hand side. So there's a stretch there that doesn't quite as work, and then the sky and the seaweed shoreline isn't contributing as
Right.
much.
One of the other things I'm always looking for is balance. And I do think they did a pretty good job of balancing the visual weight of this image. I mean, you've got this left-hand mountain is about the same distance from the edge of the screen or edge of the frame as the mountain on the right. So they did a good job there. But I'm just wondering maybe if a crop, maybe lose most of this mountain on the right and then include a little bit less sky. I'm just wondering if, one of the things I like to tell my students is, unless the sky is ridiculously good, you don't need that much sky to convey to the viewer, here is a sky, right? And
Unless
so
the sky is the feature for the picture, of
ex
course, yeah. But definitely,
exactly,
it should
exactly.
it should complement.
And Rajesh joined us as well. So I'm curious, Rajesh, do you have any thoughts on this particular image?
Yeah, I basically I concur with what Tim was saying. Like the interest is right in the middle, and too much of the sky can be a downer sometimes. Like even if it is a very pretty sky, sometimes you'll have to sacrifice that in order to bring the attention to the important parts of the image, interesting parts of the image.
Yep. All right,
One
cool.
of the things that I've done when I'm out on either teaching somebody then now and again, or with my own photography, I'm not sure what the picture is. I'll gradually crop into what I think of the core part of it is. So hopefully, I would have gone in and taken the wide picture, but also captured the closer detail. So you use a few different focal ranges, just in case you come back to it later and think, God, wish I'd have been able to crop into on that bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. Tim, what's another image
The
that
other image is number 10, I think. That one
okay.
got through to the second round judging as well.
Yeah, so this one's interesting, right? Because we spent a lot of time putting some verbiage into our rules and our submission guidelines that talk about man-made objects, right?
Yeah.
And we actually spent a lot of time thinking about it too, because we know that sometimes man-made objects can really accentuate a landscape and it's part of the landscape, right? And so I think in this particular example, the the man-made object or the building is not the core subject of the photograph. It just plays a part in the landscape that
Yeah, I
they're
think
trying to show here.
it's borderline here, isn't it? And it's if it's borderline, we tend to pass it through to the judges to make their own decisions on it.
Right. So in terms of what I like about it, again, visual weight, I like that they've included just this little sliver of the ground and the trees. I'm guessing they use a pretty long telephoto lens to convey that the size and scale of these mountains behind the building there. And then you've got this stuff here at the top, the fog. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, you don't need this much sky to convey that there's an empty foggy sky above this mountain range. You could have probably cropped half of that sky at least off the top, and
Yeah.
it would still have the same effect, and it would probably emphasize the scale of those mountains even more. So
It would push attention down into the picture a bit more. And I absolutely love that stretch of mountains seen through the mist as well. It's a great idea. I think it's a really strong picture, to be honest.
yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, the ground there, like I know they included a sliver of it. Maybe there was a possibility to include more because it wasn't included. I agree with you that the top of it could have been cropped to bring attention more to the subject matter and onto the mountains.
And then, I don't know about y'all, but I'm always looking for distractions on the edges of my frame. And on this particular image, you've got these branches over here. Now, dealing with stuff like that in our rules where you can't just indiscriminately clone out stuff or remove stuff with the remove tool, what I would suggest is either A, when you're in the field, try to compose to eliminate those distractions, emphasizing your fieldcraft. Or B, when you get home, maybe crop a little bit of this off. You easily could have cropped off this part of the edge here, kept in this interesting stuff here, and this wouldn't have been a distraction anymore. So those are things I'm looking for when I'm quickly evaluating an image. So I don't know about
You
y'all.
could even leave that one, the most further left branch in, and get rid of the other two because that wouldn't be as distracting then, I don't think. The same goes for the greenery on the left-hand side sticking in slightly. It's not overly distracting, but if it got any further in the competition, I'd start to look at that and go, okay, it's not really as balanced as it could be. Now that could be dealt with just by a little local desaturation.
Yeah,
that would reduce the distraction there.
I agree.
That's the difference between good images and great images, right? Again, when the good image wants to be considered great, then you don't want to have those distractions.
Yeah, gradually you start looking at smaller differences. I mean, when you're getting towards the later stage of this competition, there's so many good images. And I'm just doing I put the images together for the book last month, and we're excluding so many images that I want to include. We could have done an 800-page book, but little things like that sound like they don't matter. But when you're comparing images, it can make a difference. But having said that, if the image is strong enough and the other image isn't quite as strong, I'd ignore that little bit of greenery as long as the image was really strong. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to take them all out.
Yeah.
It's just playing the game slightly and tweaking things, desaturating a little bit, excluding stuff if possible. Do you want me to pick one that didn't do quite as well for that one?
Yes, you read my mind. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously why that one didn't get any further. I think with our rules on people, I couldn't see that in the sample there. But it's also not just the people rule there. There's a couple of other things going. There's the fact it's a very well-known location.
Right.
And then there's also the intrusive nature of the out of focus rock in the foreground. I mean, that might have worked if it was sharp in focus and it was maybe not so close to the edges, but that would be a distraction as well. So it would automatically, for me, lose points.
I mean, going back to what I said about visual weight, look at how much real estate that foreground rock occupies. Now, if that foreground rock had some really, really, really interesting stuff going on, absolutely include that. But in this particular instance, it's not really doing you any favors. I know they probably wanted to include all of this amazing reflection, but I was thinking for an image like this, first of all, putting somebody in the scene for a natural landscape competition, I would say I would shy on the side of not doing that unless it's really, really, really helping tell the story of the image. I can only think of one photograph that worked really well for in the competition. That was in Tiago Mateus's tree project.
In the context of the project with all the other photographs, that worked quite well.
But I'm thinking,
can you have a look? Go on.
I was just gonna say, like, in terms of visual interest, there's a lot of really cool stuff happening in this photograph. I mean, you've got this awesome splashy wave here, right? You've got this beautiful reflection of these mountains. I mean, you could easily crop this image, and I think it would just be stronger, right? I mean, I don't know where you want to crop it at, but I'm just playing around. And if I were to include just the stuff that had more visual interest, something like that, it's already a much stronger
It's
image,
working
right?
better. There's another example of one that
Yes.
didn't get through to the second round. I think it's number 11. I'll tell you when you've got it up.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is a little bit too soft for me. I mean, if you look at the foreground, it's quite soft.
Yeah.
And by
Definitely.
soft, you mean out of focus?
Out of focus, yeah. Maybe there was shake. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a telephoto shot.
Or it
Might have
could be
shifted
like
the weight.
a really extreme crop, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean,
I
it does look
mean,
like it's sharper in the background, so it could possibly be a depth of field issue.
yeah, but even with a telephoto, I mean, that stuff is so far in the distance.
Yeah, it should be in, shouldn't it? Yeah.
I mean, even at like f7, it should be all in focus. So, yeah, I agree with you, Rajesh. The composition for me in this image is, I like the comp. I mean, I think it's got good visual flow with this lake in the foreground, and then you've got these peaks. Again, I don't know that you need to include all this sky. I mean, I would be compelled to crop off, down to halfway through this brighter
Yeah.
blue sky here, something like that. And then the foreground is pretty dark. I would have like to have seen that just a little bit brighter. I mean, it has kind of a gloomy feel to it. One thing I like to do, I don't know about y'all, but I like to look at the histogram of my images. And if you look at this histogram of this file, there's still quite a bit of room on the right-hand side of the histogram, which corresponds to the whites. So, I mean, just imagine if you use the tone curve and you just pulled the tone curve up just a little bit before it starts to clip, you've already
Get
got
those
a little bit more detail in the foreground.
Yeah.
It just makes for a much stronger image. As long as you're not clipping the highlights of these mountain peaks, I think it makes for a stronger image.
Right. Next person.
Next person. Thanks, Alexander, for letting us look at your
Yeah, brilliant.
images. All right, so next we've got Andrew Warren. And I think
Yep.
Andrew submitted several for a project as well.
There was a 10 in a project, but if you can look at number 11, I think that's the one that did the best.
I really like this shot a lot.
Yeah,
In
very
fact,
nice.
I think you can see, not to give any secrets away, but down here you can see the rating that I gave it, because I think this is the catalog I used
Oh,
for
okay, yeah.
scoring. But I mean, I'm a sucker for these detail shots of leaves and frost, and I
A
think,
little bit of frost goes a long way, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah, and I think, the challenge with these types of photographs is, from my perspective, at being someone who likes to try to find them, is the composition. It's really, really, really hard to compose photographs like this. It looks like it would be simple, but once you start getting really tied in with all these details and abstract scenes like this, you've got all these lines and these patterns, and they all have to kind of make sense. And I think for his image here, he does a pretty good job of it. I don't mind the center weighted composition here. I think it works pretty
No.
well, but I would have liked to see a little bit more room on this upper edge on the left to give this neat little, I think that's one of those tree seeds that falls out of the sky.
Yeah, sycamore. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have liked to see a little bit more room for that to breathe. I don't know what else is on the other side of that. Maybe.
Actually, I agree with you. I mean, going through this, all the images that he submitted, beautiful work with a lot of pleasing colors. But I agree with you, the compositions are a little too tight, and especially in this one too.
Yeah,
This actually, yeah.
that's
So
the only
yes,
bit that I can think of that really distracting. I mean, it did get through to the main judging this one, so it did well.
yeah.
It's a strong image. What
Then
else
look
you
at
I
got?
like the texture in those, like the leathery texture that comes through.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
have a look at number 1.
Number 1. Yes. So
Oh,
I will start off by saying, in terms of these types of images, these woodland, these kind of tight, interesting woodland images, we get a lot of them submitted to the competition. So in order for them to stand out, there has to be a lot of really interesting things happening for the photograph for it to stand out for us. This might stand out in comparison with maybe your other images or with images you might see online. But in the context of a competition that receives a lot of woodland image, you really have to have a lot of visual interest for it to kind of elevate up and above and beyond what other people are submitting. So in that context, I'm looking for things that are a distraction or a compositional challenge. So, you've got all of these branches down here. I wish Alex could be here because he'd probably be like, stop trying to be perfect with your photographs. But, for looking for flaws, that's how we're going to differentiate between images. You've got this branch over here that kind of pulls you off the frame a little bit there. I like all this funky spindly stuff in the corners and the edges up here. I think that works well. But I think some of
There's
these,
just some awkward ones, aren't there? There are some awkward bits. Like you say, that bit at the bottom left-hand side is slightly awkward, and the bit on the right-hand side there.
yeah,
All the complexity at the top doesn't match. I mean, when I was looking at this one, I do think it's a fabulous composition in terms of balance and structure on a base level. What let it down for me is the palette was slightly less pleasing, and I think there's little bits like I'm not sure whether somebody's tried to climb over that tree and worn away a bit on the center of it. Yeah, things like that just distract slightly for me. So
yeah, and I
but
don't know that you need all
mostly I
this
think
stuff
it's the
at the
palette.
bottom. I don't think you need all this stuff at the bottom. It's like I feel like you could have cropped some of that out. This
Yeah,
because for me,
still a
like
strong.
all the really interesting stuff is at the top, and all that stuff at the bottom just kind of distracts me as the viewer. I don't know what you think about that, but
Yeah, I wouldn't take it much off, but I think it could a little bit could become come off there. It's a
Uh,
tough one though, but
yeah,
because I think the composition there is still really strong. The way it's the way that left hand corner is grounded, it
mhm.
creates like a base for a statue almost, and then it leans upward and outward from there. So I think compositionally it you can't really improve it too much. Again, I said it's like the subject in terms of the textures and the purpley browns against the greens isn't as pleasing a color combination as other pictures we might have had. In terms of photograph, it's still really strong, and I presume that was probably right on the borderline of getting through to the main judging.
I would have preferred to see it go a little bit wider, especially on the left-hand side instead of cropping it further. The kind of awkward cutoff on the left side at the base is kind of bothering to me.
Yeah, I think it's that big trunk going off the left hand side in the middle is a problem to go any wider, and I
It's
think so that.
interesting. It's interesting
I mean,
because I actually don't mind that at all. In fact, I like
yeah,
the balance that this branch has with this branch over here. They have about the
yeah,
same
that
amount.
that does work.
So it kind of helps pull you into the frame, but I'm very curious to see what's outside the left-hand frame too, Rajesh, to your point. I
Yeah,
wonder if there's more stuff over there that could have helped the composition, but we don't know.
yeah. So my gut feeling it's possibly a little too cool for what it is. I mean, this is all subjectual, so as a picture on its own, it still works. It if it's looking for that sort of like slightly dank gloom you get in these forests, it's perfect representation.
Hmm. And
There's a picture alongside other things.
by cool you mean color temp?
No, yeah, it's cool in temperature. So if it was warmed up, it might look a little differentiating between the foreground and background slightly.
I could see that.
But then again, that's maybe not what the picture's about, so it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, and to your point, I felt like this image, for what all the good it has going for it, I felt like there wasn't enough color separation between the different elements of the scene. I would have liked to have seen the color palette between these greens here be a little bit more differentiated from the greens on the ground, which
Yeah.
I don't really know how you would do that, but that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, it's not something we'd advocate changing in terms of the picture, but sometimes the subject doesn't do what you want it to do.
That's right. What
So
else? Which other one do you want to see?
another one, hang on a second. Let's have a look at one that didn't do quite as well. Hang on.
Maybe 14.
14, which one you got there?
It's this one here.
Yeah, that one's in the project. Let's have a look at, I think go for number 9.
Number 9.
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
got to the second round
Yeah.
of pre. Yeah.
I mean, I have so much empathy for people who like to photograph in the woodlands because it's very difficult for composition. I mean, you have all of this chaos, all of these branches and these tiny little spindly things. And I have a very strong feeling that most photographers who are showcasing powerful woodland scenes are doing a lot of cloning and a lot of removal of distracting elements, which we don't allow in our competition. So it makes composition even more challenging to nail
Yeah.
correctly. So, but with that being said, I do like all of that intertwininess of this image. I think it works really well in terms of, forcing my eye to move all through the image. I think it's got a lot of really good things going for it, which is probably why it made it onto the second round of the competition.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
only thing that I would, like I think we do allow this in our competition is that you could have knocked down the exposure on the bottom left
Mm,
branch so that the visual flow would be a little better.
this guy
Because right
here.
now it's, yeah, that guy there.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah, just a little bit of burning on that part of the. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's totally allowed in our competition. I mean, obviously it needs to be tasteful, but yes. What
Yeah, I
else?
think this one again, it does well. It is slightly messy because of those branches that don't have the moss on them in terms of as perfect as you can get it. Again, it is what it is. It represents what's there. But it is one of those that works but fails probably alongside the many other pictures we had from forest
Right.
pictures. So
He's
it's not
he
necessarily criticism of what was done by the photographer.
I kind of wanted to look at this particular shot here of these flowers because this is a type of subject that I would be drawn to photograph as well. And I can tell you from my own experience photographing these types of scenes, it's really difficult to figure out the correct depth of field to convey what you're trying to convey. It's also really difficult to eliminate all of the undergrowth distractions that can occur when you're kind of shooting down at the ground. And I think that's where this image definitely has some challenges. I mean, you've got this bright blade of grass down here that's a distraction towards the corner. You've got another one on this bottom edge. You've got more over on this side. But I do like how these little filaments kind of wind and weave throughout the image. I'm almost feeling like depth of field was either there was too much in focus or not enough in focus. I just feel like
Yeah.
it's slight
These
miss there.
these really annoying
Yeah.
flowers that don't all occur on the same plane of focus. Very
The other,
distracting thing.
yeah, the other thing you could probably look at the histogram. I think the blacks are clipped.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's another way of simplifying things, isn't it? But I
Yeah.
think it's a difficult one to organize, and you end up with situations where there's lots of things overlapping that don't add to the picture because you can get overlaps that work well in the structure of the picture and the way the flow works. But things like the double parallel strands of stem in the middle of the picture, just above the center, they draw your eye, as do the ones at the bottom right hand side, but they don't really add to the flow of the picture. There's a lot
Mhm.
going on, sort of like randomly. It makes your eye a bit jittery.
Is that a Scottish term?
Jittery. I like it. Yeah, that works.
I love it, Tim. All right,
Yeah.
anything else for this one?
Yeah, just the bottom is not doing too much either, so we could have lost some of the bottom part.
Yeah. Yeah, especially this little blade here that's this triangle. Yep. Okay.
Next.
Next person?
Yeah, thank you for that submitting that one. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. All right. We've got I think it's Audie
Yeah.
Nowak or Novak.
And
You
this
guys
is
know,
the one that did the best. So
yeah, you guys know that I have a soft corner for nightscapes, and it's not an easy genre to plan and execute really well. Like kudos for pursuing astrophotography. Like and taking these
absolutely.
images. You know, uh, Now the challenge with nightscapes often is post-processing, right? So, if you do too much, it looks garish and over-processed, and if you do too little, then you can't bring out the details of the night sky. So the trick, in my opinion, is not to process the images to make the ground look like it was taken during the day. I know it's a
Mm.
delicate balancing act, and so to retain the details of the landscape while bringing out the details of the night sky. This
You'll
image,
notice, look, does this look like a blend in terms of near sunset and then full night?
No, I don't think so because we do not
Okay.
allow blue hour blends in our competition, basically.
So
So
it's
it can,
just a glow from maybe a city in the background or something.
I believe so. Yes,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's definitely light
not light
pollution.
pollution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Rajesh. I mean, I think if you're gonna do a longer exposure for the foreground like this, I think it needs to be done in a way to where the foreground doesn't look brighter than the night sky. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more careful attention placed on how the balance the exposure for the foreground was in relation to the dark sky. I actually really like this night sky. I think some of the stuff in the bottom half of it is a little bit more, probably quite a bit oversaturated. But I kind of like these diffused stars. Probably, there's those are caused by like some very thin clouds in the atmosphere diffusing the light of the stars, which is pretty neat. As far as composition goes, you've got this little thing in the bottom left that it's a distraction. I'm not very convinced that this foreground does you much favors. I mean, it's there, but it doesn't really help the photograph at all. And then the other thing I would say is, it's a very recognizable scene. I mean, that's the Matterhorn, right? It's a very famous subject for night photography, and so I appreciate that they try to put their own little twist on it, but the foreground here just is not doing any favors, in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay. What else you got?
Do you want to try out the number 4, maybe?
Number 4.
This is very well done. The only nit that I have is like the Milky Way going out of the frame, kind of like leading the viewer out of the frame. So perhaps maybe the timing could have been a little bit better. I don't know the local conditions, maybe the Milky Way could have been a little bit towards the left. It's just a compositional issue. It's beautifully balanced. I like the foreground. I like how it feels like at night, not the day. And the sky is also beautifully done. But the only nit is the leading of the eye out of the frame because the Milky Way arcing towards the right.
Yeah, and a couple of things I would point out compositionally. You have all of this negative space in the upper left-hand corner that really doesn't add to the photograph. I know they wanted to include this nebula here, which is probably why they didn't compose it with just this, the right half of the image is where all the visual interest is. I'm also just curious, like what the light source was for these tufts of grass. I mean, I shoot a lot of night photography, and you can tell that light's coming from the right-hand side of the frame, and so I'm just wondering what the light source is for that. And
it
then
could have been just starlight, Matt.
yeah, but I feel like it would have been a little bit more evenly lit if it was starlight. So it could be from a city or, there could be something creating the light, but I'm just curious. It's not like a nick on it or anything.
Yeah.
But I will say from a processing perspective, this is almost certainly a blend of foreground and sky. And what I'm always looking for in blends like this is you don't want it to look like you took an X-Acto knife to the foreground, which is what it looks like here. You want to use a technique where you can blend it using a little bit more feathering, I guess is the word I'm looking for, so that it's doesn't look like it's a knife. And that's just a technique issue in terms of processing.
Especially on that right-hand edge where it would be, they've got the tufts of whatever they are, marsh grass, which would give some texture to that right-hand line.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I like the fact they've kept it looking dark there, though.
Agreed.
All the foreground and stuff. So it looks better in my eyes to do that than have it fully illuminated.
All right, shall we move on to the next one? Next person? All right, thanks, Adi. Next we have Brian Nicholson.
Bring up his panel. All right, those two. Let's bring in. Go for number 6, I think, if that's an island. Yeah, okay. That's the one that did best and it got through to the pre-finals.
Okay. It's very interesting. I mean, it looks like there's almost like rain or something happening. And you've got all these little birds that dot the horizon, which is a really cool effect. You got these 2 birds here. I think compositionally, what I'm always looking for is like, what's the subject, right? The subject for me is this island in relationship to the ocean with this nice sky. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more going on in the sky, like maybe another bird up in here, or I mean, obviously you can't just copy and paste a bird and paste it in there, but it'd be nice if there was something up in this part of the photograph that helped kind of my eye bounce around. Because right now it's really just keeps me down in here and my eye doesn't really have any need to go up into here. So that would be my only compositional complaint, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's really strong. Apart from that, it would have been nice to have some more of that rain texture throughout the whole image. But I have a feeling this might have suffered for asking the question, is it about the wildlife in there, or is it about the landscape? And it's a bit of a borderline how interesting it is. If you take out the building and take out all the birds, it's just an island on a horizon with some rain. So even though I think it's a really strong image, it may have suffered for that.
Yeah. I do like the rain though, the rain kind of floating down. I think if anything, they could have potentially accentuated that a little bit. Looking at the histogram again, there's a little bit of room to push that, and I think that's probably the brighter part of the image. So, if you would have just pushed the brights a little bit further, I think that could have really helped pull out some of the contrast that's going on between.
It just get a bit more texture in the sky doing that.
Yeah, exactly. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Very simple fix too. What do you got,
And
Rajesh?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's we do allow post-processing. So a lot of people have this impression that, we allow no post-processing at all, but that's not true. So like, as long as it's tastefully done and it's within reasonable limits, post-processing is good. And this is one good example of where post-processing could have elevated this image.
Do you want to try number 12, Matt?
Number 12, got it.
I think that one did well as well. Got through to the main judging for the last 20%.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, what is it, Alex? Alex Snail, he's always says that like a single tree doesn't make for a very interesting composition.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Generally, if something's bang centered in the middle of the image, it's not as dynamic. It's a fairly static composition. But if it works, it works. And so they're not hard and fast rules. And I think in this case, it works. It works well. And obviously, the image is done quite well for it. There's nice interest in the sky there, just above the sun. The way the sun's burning through the tree there is fantastic. I really like that reddy orange glow that you can see.
I found the shadow interesting. It's pretty straight line.
The diagonal lines on either side of the frame at the bottom where the shadows cast. So it's got a lot going for it.
It's interesting because I can see how we each rated it over here in our caption. And so, Tim, you rated this very highly as a 4. Rajesh, you gave it a 3, and then Alex and I rated it a 2. And I think from my perspective, I like the center. I like center weighted compositions. I don't have any issue with that actually. And I love the sun coming through. For me, I feel like this photograph suffers a lot from color cast. There's a lot of just everything is orange. And so there's no color separation between the sky and the foreground and the trees. Everything is kind of this mustard orange color. I don't know if that's actually what it was like to photograph that scene, but if it was my photograph, I would have probably tried to do a little bit of elimination of color cast in Photoshop. Is you can either use TK panel, or you can create an action to identify kind of the average weight of the colors in the photograph, and then it removes the cast. Carefully selecting some of these colors and reducing some of that warmness to them, I think would have helped this image stand out a little bit more for me. All right, what else you got?
I'll pick one that didn't do quite as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful scene. I love this distant lake. I love the clouds. I love the soft light on the landscape across the way. I love these purple flowers. I just felt like for me, everything is kind of muddy is maybe the word I would use. It's like everything just feels a little bit too dark. And then of course my eye is really pulled up to this right-hand corner where the clouds are bright. I probably would have tried to burn down some of those bright clouds. And then again, looking at the histogram, you've got a ton of room on the right-hand side of the histogram. So I probably would have, done something, I mean, really extreme like this, and then come back in and fix some of those bright clouds.
The foreground looks a bit better already.
Exactly. And that's what was missing for me, is that foreground was just really, really, really dark, and
for me, it's too much sky and too little ground. There could have been a little bit more breathing space at the bottom and then less at the top.
Yeah, I think compositionally, there's some odd things going on as well. I mean, the heather there on the right hand side, if that's a feature, then there's not enough of it. If the feature is the background that you're trying to represent, there's too much of it. On the left-hand side, we've got this little lake or reservoir, which is very close to the bottom of the frame. So I find it's not really acting as the best part of the core of the picture, and yet it is attracting my attention. So then you've got tension between that little lake and the little lake in the far distance that's holding your eye. So this compositionally, it's just a little bit unbalanced.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff on the left, that's when I'm looking at a photo, I'm asking myself, what is this photo about? Right? And for me, this photograph is about this beautiful soft light on this distant hillside, this nice lake, this lake down here, maybe some of this foreground stuff, and then these beautiful clouds. But you don't need to include all this stuff on the left. In fact, I would probably be looking, if it was my image, I'd be looking at something like this, like a much more simplistic crop, because
And now the header's playing a big role now, isn't it?
right.
Yep,
And now
look
you've
at the
got
difference. Mhm.
and now you've got this balance between my eye can bounce between this bright hillside, this lake, and I'm just kind of bouncing back and forth. I'm not pulled off the edge of the frame to the right. This foreground kind of helps anchor that bottom right-hand corner, and everything kind of feels more cohesive just with a simple crop.
Yeah,
And the
just
top of
a simple
the top of the picture is no longer open. It's closed because it's slightly shaded.
Right.
We can actually enjoy the heather.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Thank you,
Should we
Brian.
move on to another person?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Now we've got Crystal Boaties or Boats. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Both, maybe.
Right. Then we've got a project in there as well as some individual pictures, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, none of these got past the first prejudging, so a bit of feedback on maybe what could be improved to get them a bit further.
Right. So if I'm looking at this image, right away, I'm asking myself, what is this photograph of? And it's clouds and a barren landscape, and that's it. There's nothing really all that visually interesting beyond that. Not to say that clouds and a barren landscape can't be interesting, but in this particular example, they don't have anything going for it that's all that interesting. There's this huge chunk of blue sky in the upper left that doesn't really add anything to the photograph. It's also, in my opinion, processed a little bit too much in terms of saturation. That blue, I mean, I've never seen a blue sky be that color before.
Yeah,
So
it looks like trying to simulate a polarizer, but it's not quite working.
or it could have been a polarizer, I don't know,
Could be a
but
polarizer as well, yeah.
yeah.
Definitely too blue. It's just too intense and dark to fit with the rest of the picture.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so if you're looking at your photographs and you're like, okay, which one should I submit to this competition? What about this photograph is something you think is going to be something that catches my attention as the judge? It's beautiful sky, beautiful clouds, an interesting landscape, but that there's nothing else to it. Like, there's not a visual interesting things down in here. Like maybe if this landscape just had one little bush here, or maybe like a sporadic selection of bushes that were cleverly placed, that might be interesting. Or maybe if there was like one or two clouds, I'm just trying to think of like what would have made the composition stronger, more
I think
interesting.
there's some interest in the bushes there in terms of tonality and structure. I mean, those muted sort of ochre colors are quite nice, but there isn't any structure to where the bushes are. The other thing is that slash of shadow in the left-hand side.
Right.
Now,
this image might have done well as a black and white, and I don't know.
I think with the black and white, still you'd be looking at the structure, and you'd actually lose structure by converting it to black and white. It's not quite good. I mean, it could be that this cropping in slightly would make it more interesting. It looks less glare in the black and white there in terms of.
Yeah, the blue saturation is definitely an issue. It's probably a polarizer, or
Can you go into the color mixer and actually lift and desaturate the blues?
Yeah, something like that.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it's obviously needs a little bit more care and attention because now plus it's a JPEG, but
crop out that center of the picture. So crop from the top left and right. So you've just got that one big cloud right at the very top of the picture. That's it. And then come in from the
something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, already it's stronger, right?
Yeah, there's now a balance going on. The interest is you're looking at the ground rather than being attracted by the large area of sky with the blues.
Right.
And I think if you got rid of that black shadow on the left-hand side and just looked for some structure in these bushes, I mean, they find an interesting bush or an interesting texture where the bushes are, and try and create a focal point around that, and then you get an image, I think, which can work quite well, and it would represent the area well as well.
Right. I want to go to another photo that was submitted by this individual, which is this photo here of a, I think that's a sheep.
It is.
Or yeah. So just a quick thing. I mean, our composition is natural landscapes. I don't necessarily think a photograph of a sheep or two sheep is going to do well. Plus, it's not in focus. You know, the focus is on this. These are the types of images that we see, and we quickly are like, okay, this I'm not, you know, this isn't going to be able to do well, and we rate it poorly.
Yeah,
Quick.
we want to see more of the area where they're from as well, probably, because it's with. I mean, as an example, that first picture with the bushes, there's obviously some interesting and original areas. We don't see many pictures from this sort of environment.
Right. I mean, they have this image they submitted of a rainbow, you know,
Yeah.
much more interesting. I mean, rainbows are hard to be differentiate because, you know, as rare as rainbows are, people love to photograph them. So if you're going to have a rainbow photograph, it better be pretty amazing. And so, you know, again, here you've got this huge swath of blue sky. Don't need it, you know. So boom, already better. And then you've got this fence, right? Like
The fence is the issue there, isn't it? It's literally blocking your view.
could you have walked, you know, 30, 40 feet up to the edge of the fence, captured the same image, and it would have been a stronger image? I think so.
Yeah.
The fence really doesn't help you, especially in the context of a natural landscape competition.
If I was there, I'd be looking at that. I can swear I can see a log, a dead log in the middle of the picture. There's a piece of interest that you could possibly approach on the fence.
That's the log, yeah. I was actually looking at is that the butte at the distance?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is the interesting part for me. So if I were to photograph this, that, you know, I would try to get that. Yeah. You know, like maybe using a longer lens and stitching a panorama might have been a good idea.
I think this environment is probably where you want to see where the creeks are, where the water's moving for a variety of foliage, and where it's cut through to get some shape and structure. There's definitely potential out there. What's number 5 looking like? That seems another one from that environment.
Yeah. So
again, particularly there's some really interest in the way that you got red rocks against a sort of a greeny ground there potentially. So there's some color variety that you can use, which contrasts really well with the sky colors. But with the fence in there, again, it's blocking the view of what we need. So.
And again, you know, if this was in the context of a project, perhaps that was about maybe the environments of a ranching, you know, this looks like a very arid environment. There's obviously some ranching occurring, you know, incorporating elements like this into a project like that can work well. But as a one-off photograph of the landscape, I would definitely recommend trying to exclude as much as you can of things that distract from the natural beauty of the landscape if you can, at least for our competition.
Pretty much, Crystal.
Yes, thank you. All right, let's do Dan Dorland. Which one do you want me to pull up first, Tim?
Interesting one from here. That one will do for a start.
So this one looks like it did the best out of all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my favorite as well among these submissions.
They both got through to the second round of prejudging, so, which is interesting. Because I mean, they look like strong images, both this one and the ice one. So it's, why didn't it get any further? Now, I think when we got black and white pictures, there's definitely a case that a lot of the judges like structure, and there's quite a few of it's a popular genre, the sort of flowing water on rocks. It'd be interesting to see how I scored this one, because I actually quite like this one.
Let's look. You gave it a 3, and Rajesh also gave it a 3, and Tim and I gave it a 2, or Alex and I gave it a 2.
I think probably the bright water at the bottom, you know, leading out of the frame probably did not allow me to give it a higher score.
Right.
I think it works overall, but it doesn't have the structure. The focal point isn't there, is it? Not sure whether the focal point is the leaves on the rock there or the patterns in the water.
Yeah, for images like this, for me, I really need for it to, be about more, I guess, and I'm having a
Yeah.
hard time articulating. But it's like, okay, you're showing me a flowing creek with leaves in it, with really interesting jagged rocks and flowing water. You did a great job of that. But in the context of what? Like, what else is there about this image that I'm supposed to be interested in? And sometimes that can be enough, but in this particular case, I feel like composition, you've got this stuff in the upper right-hand corner that's kind of, a little bit of a distraction. You've got this stuff in the right-hand corner that's a distraction. This rock in the bottom left doesn't really add anything to the photograph. So for me, when I'm looking at images like this, I think you need to like get more cropped in, like show me a little bit more tighter part of the scene. Like my eye doesn't really know where to go or know what
I'm just
the
I'm getting that myself now as I'm looking at it, because I'm looking at it from a distance and thinking it's actually nice, it's nicely balanced. But as I start looking around it, I start to think, what am I looking at? Which bit am I looking at?
Yeah, it's just like what do you want me to look at? I guess is the question I'm asking as the viewer, and I'm having a hard time answering that question for myself. Like I don't, like okay, got this flowing water up here, you got this flowing water down here, you've got this strip of rock with leaves on it. For me, that strip of rock with leaves on it is probably what drew the photographer to photograph this scene. So I would encourage them to really, really, really focus in on that particular part of the image, maybe get tighter with a telephoto, really distill down what is of visual interest that drew you to photograph this scene, and try to exclude some of the distractions from the edges that don't necessarily help convey what you found interesting.
Yeah.
I did it. I was able to convey what I don't like about it.
Can you do me a favor and crop about a third from the bottom
Yeah. So
and about just less than a quarter from the left?
and to the left.
Bit more,
From more?
bit more from the bottom,
Yeah.
about there, and then a bit from the left hand side. I just wanted to see because I keep coming back to those flows of water in the top right.
Is that kind of
And
what you had in mind?
yeah,
I was more bothered about the distraction on the bottom right side, that
Mhm.
little dark line there.
yeah,
Man, already this is stronger. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it's, okay, now I see you want me to look at this rock jutting down the side of this mountainside with
yeah.
water and leaves. Like that's what you want me to see. And I
You've
get
now
it.
got two focal points, isn't there? There's the rock and then the water above it. So it's not as much tension.
Right. Okay.
Do you want to go to the ice one, the first one?
Yeah. So I mean, this one, I mean, it has really a fast visual impact because
Yeah,
it's very unusual. You've got the light kind of creeping out through the ice. You've got this ice over here that's glowing. I'm having a little bit of internal chuckle because I gave it a 2 and Rajesh gave it a 4. And I would say probably the reason why I didn't score it as highly is because I totally know what the photographer was drawn to. This glowing ice. I mean, good
yeah.
God.
It's stunning.
But like this top ceiling stuff over here, and then this stuff in the bottom right, it just doesn't help at all. It doesn't help convey the story of the image of what you found visually interesting about this, what drew you to capture this photograph. And I don't know this person. I don't know. I can't answer the question for them, but I bet it was probably the light coming through the hole here, and then this amazing glow of the ice on the left. So therefore, I would have tried as hard as I could as a photographer to exclude the stuff that doesn't help convey what they found interesting.
Yeah,
I
my eyes
actually like the
my eyes drawn to that
triangles.
band of light at the bottom left hand side where the light's shining through it, and all that does is attract me to to the very bottom bit of it, the diagonal line of light that's come through.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because I'm drawn to there, I'm drawn to the messy texture of the ice. So that is a distraction. Sorry, Rajesh.
No, I was gonna say, I like the diagonals and I like the triangles. So the roof actually does help. I like the roof that is included. Maybe I could have probably left out a little bit on the left-hand side so that the edge comes closer to where the diagonal light on the floor is. So that's something that they could have.
Fascinating. See, that's crazy because I think the hero of this photograph is this stuff right here, this glowing green ice. I mean, come on. Do you see glowing green ice all the time? No.
That's why they didn't crop it the way that we're trying to crop, you know.
So you're saying crop in like that?
Slightly, yeah. And I know it's a delicate balancing act there.
All right.
Take the whole
I'll
foreground out.
take. Okay, hold on. Wait. Hold on. You want me to do what, Tim?
Take the whole foreground out.
Take it all out?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then take the right hand out. Yeah.
I mean, let's get rid of that ceiling too. Come on.
I don't mind a bit of the ceiling. You probably
I
live
know,
with some of
but I want you to see.
Try it. Try it out.
It doesn't. You don't need it.
No, you don't. And you could have a bit more foreground in so that column is complete.
I mean, if we're gonna get real crazy, I mean, if I was there,
Just have that
for me,
left-hand side.
like, yeesh, look at this stuff. I mean, get closer, use a wide angle lens, get really close up to that stuff, and
I'd have photographed the hell out of it.
Matt, we don't know. Maybe they did photograph all that, and
Yeah.
this was the only one they submitted. So
true.
The biggest distraction for me is the black on the right-hand side,
Right.
the messy foreground, and potentially the diagonal bit of roof at the top. Those are the things that are
Right.
so
I mean, I
half the
think,
foreground.
yeah, I feel like just accentuating the stuff that's a visual interest.
That works better already. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this
I mean,
one
if you
too.
want to keep all that stuff, really
One of the things
emphasize.
one of the things potentially you could say about the black specks in the foreground
Mhm.
is there's a few tricks for making it less distracting. Things like using negative clarity on a brush,
Mhm.
so they don't look quite as bold.
Or negative texture. Yeah.
Or negative texture, that sort of thing. You may be able to lift the black level for that part of the foreground.
Mhm.
So you could make them a bit less distracting. I mean, that's working a lot better already.
Mhm.
And I quite like the way that the diagonal of the roof and the light works together now.
Mhm. Yeah, it works better now for me anyway. Sometimes a simple crop is all you need, man.
Okay, thank you very much,
All right,
Dan.
thanks, Dan. I think we have time to do one more.
Okay.
Let's do Dennis Churin, and I think they're all pretty equally rated, so maybe we just start with this one.
Looks nice. The diagonal light on the forest one.
Oh, you want to do the forest one?
We can do after. We'll do that one after.
Okay, we'll do this one first. So, man, what do we say about this image? I was gonna say my initial, it has a lot of initial impact because of the contrast, and there's a lot of diagonal lines that are intersecting. You have a lot of visual interest in the sky. This is an example of where I think they use an appropriate amount of sky. Maybe a little too much, but this dark cloud in the upper right's pretty dominating in terms of the visual weight that it carries. I like the inclusion of the road here. I'm not sure I like the inclusion of the two people walking down the road and the fence here. I don't know. I maybe would have cropped some of that, but I like the snow-covered hillside over here and the clouds kind of rolling down. And I actually really like the shadow right here that plays against this diagonal line here, because you can see it creates this flow from here to the middle, to the left, to the right, up through the frame. So compositionally, there's a lot going on that works pretty well. What do you got?
Yeah,
I think too much sky for me. I would have lost the top, maybe 20%.
Right.
My reaction straight away is there's a ton of interesting stuff going on. Absolutely. But pretty quickly I start looking at the clouds and wondering if there's been some dehazing or clarity being thrown in there, because just above the horizon on the right hand side, it starts to look very odd to me around that horizon. So, and in terms of subject and composition, I can see a lot interesting stuff going on the left hand side, like you say, with the snowy hill and this little foreground with a light on it. And I can see interesting stuff on the right hand side with that horizon line with the butts and the road. But it's sort of like it's like the compositions on the far left and the far right, with not so much going on in the middle. So
right, there's not much tying it together.
Yeah. So I'd be tempted to say that there's two pictures or two separate pictures going on there, where the majority of the interest is on that right hand side. So there's probably more of interest there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, something like
Yeah,
that.
the texture in that foreground's great there. And then it's just a matter of what to do with the sky and how to deal with because it's obviously very bright, you can tell.
Yeah, I'm not sure that cropping helps it, but I agree with you that there's almost two different images here.
Yeah. So it's a hard one. I mean, perhaps perhaps if you lost a lot of the sky, it might help. I don't know. Make it into a panorama that sweeps from left to right.
Yeah, it's
Anyway, number 4.
number 4. Interesting. This one did slightly better. I like the composition, the light that kind of flows up here and then takes a turn to the right there.
Yeah.
This pine tree in the left-hand corner is, for me, it occupies a lot of space, a lot of visual weight, and it's dark and doesn't really add much to the scene. I mean, imagine just for a second if just a little bit of that light filtering through was hitting the branches of that tree. I mean, that would create more visual interest over there to help tie everything together. But for me, like, it's simple, which I really like simple compositions, but there's a lot of visual weight that doesn't really add to the photograph.
Yeah. The bold slash of light is the thing that's making it really interesting. But when you look for one of the things I've done, I think I mentioned it in the last set of critiques, is when I'm assessing a picture, I say, okay, I like that. What's the next thing it's got? And I go through that process a few times. And if it keeps on offering a next thing and a next thing, I know I'm onto something good. If it's just got the one thing, like the one trick pony, then I'm saying, is it really satisfying in the same way? Like that tree on the left-hand side, which appears compositionally dominant, but isn't actually playing a part in supporting the picture.
I personally think that if that tree was lit, it would have been more of a distraction than
Potentially, yeah.
a contributing element. And I also think that this composition, while nice, it's a little bit too tight. Again, about breathing space, and especially on the left-hand side, it goes all the way to the edge and then makes an abrupt turn.
Yeah.
So
that's why initially it looks quite interesting. It's the way that light's playing. At least that's what I sort of saw as the feature.
I agree with you, Rajesh. I would have liked to see a little bit more breathing room on this upper left-hand corner, especially with this bright tree so close to the edge. And especially if it was dark over here on the left, that would have really helped the composition more in terms of accomplishing what the photographer wanted to do with the image.
It does look like a cloudy day, so you'd expect there was a chance to get some light in different places on the horizon.
I will say this really good instincts though, seeing the scene and understanding that it had potential. I think it really does a good job here of, that diagonal line intersecting with another diagonal line. I think good instincts on the part of the photographer.
Do you want to pick another one that did okay or one that didn't do as well?
I think they all did equally okay.
Yeah, try the tree view one, which I think is number 6.
Number 6. Yeah, this one is very interesting, right? Because you have this tree on the right, and you have these other 2 trees that are different. So from a compositional standpoint, I actually really like it. I just wish there was more on the right-hand side of the frame. Again, you've got all of this visual weight in between the 2 trees on the left, and then you have this big chunk of space to the right of them, and then there's that tree on the right-hand corner. And my eye wants that tree on the right-hand side to be a little bit closer to the other 2 trees just for symmetry and visual balance and weight. And right now it's like my eye is like, oh, I want to look over here, but now I have to look. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think, Tim.
Yeah, I agree. The 2 things that what else I'd say initially is it struck me as really interesting, especially with this the yellow lichen and the red dogwoods or whatever it is in the background, red stems. Then the 2 things that start to distract me is the fact that the tree on the right there's not as much on the right going on. And combined with the quite intense green, I'm not a huge fan of the greens in this case. It's really dominant as a distraction. So for me, all the picture is in the left-hand side 2/3. And the last thing is possibly the halo, the autumn effect. It's not to my taste. I know some people like it.
Yeah, it definitely looks like there's been a little bit of that Orton-y feel applied to it, but not too bad, but
no.
I agree. What about for you, Rajesh?
So for me, the one thing that bothered me is that bush on the left-hand side, the half bush.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's one thing. And again, I felt that this shot could have been a little bit wider so that, there's, again, breathing space, as we talked about quite a bit in today's critique session. Definitely need to see a little bit more space around because we don't know what's out there. And I get the feeling some of these too tight compositions could have been because of camera gear. I do not know, maybe micro
I
towards
suspect a lot of it
things like that.
in the complexity of the forest, it's probably subject failure. There probably is too much going on to the left and right to actually include.
Yeah.
And the thing that really interests me about that I've not seen before is that yellow lichen and the combination with the red and the greens. That's what would have attracted me, because I know everywhere you go, there's good tree compositions. So you look at a picture and think, what is it I can include in this picture that's the unique thing? What's going to make it stand out against potentially other people's photographs? Because there's going to be a lot of people doing this.
I mean, I really, really, really like this tree on the right because it's so different than the rest of the photograph, but
Yeah.
it's just there's not enough of it. I mean, if that tree was here,
Yeah. Yeah,
and then you
absolutely.
cropped in from the right a little, it'd be like a really powerful composition. So I'm just curious, like, if you were to crop in like that,
Yeah, that works better for me already.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that green now works because it's in balance with the other two colors as well.
yeah, and just imagine if that leaning tree
Yeah.
is there, then it'd be like, ooh, that's really nice. So I think, again, this photographer has good instincts. Like they recognize there's something interesting here. It's just the composition just didn't quite work, but it's a solid image either way, I think. But in context with 12,000 images that are, some of them are slightly better, that's where we start to look for things that could have been a little bit more visually appealing. All right, well, this has been fun. We're hopefully going to do more of these. We have a list of, gosh, probably 20 more people who submitted images they want critique for. So we have our work cut out for us. But for now,
I enjoy it though. It is interesting, isn't it, to do?
Yeah.
it is. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my goal for doing these critiques is to not only help the few people that got randomly selected to have their images critiqued here, but also to provide value to all of the entrants to the competition or potential entrants to help them understand kind of what we're looking for as the prejudges in terms of, what makes or breaks a photograph and what can be improved in your photography going forward. So
Yeah, I would like to take a moment to first of all, say kudos to every one of you that asked for feedback. It's a very, very important, and it's if we can help you get there in your photographic journey, great. And we hope so that you got something actionable today. Like all the feedback that we got.
right, like, oh, that Mac guy is really mean.
And Rajesh is too nice. He gives all fours.
Well, that's what's good about the way that we do the competition, though, is like there's things that I have a preference for that you don't, and vice versa. And so what happens there is certain styles of images will all make it through. And then it's up to our judging panel to then distill down what their favorites are. So, and hopefully every year it's going to be different because we have different judges on the panel. So one year you might
That's
have
been proven because we've had some photographs that have been entered a second time and they've done differently.
That's right. So, if you didn't do well this year, I would definitely encourage you to try again next year and maybe take a look at some of the images you submitted and think about how you could make simple changes to the existing images you have to make them stronger for the competition. All right.